that year was the craziest dichotomy for me. I was like enjoying meeting new people, voice actors. I was meeting famous people left and right that went to these Comic-Cons. Like I met Chris Hemsworth, like just bumping into people that I never thought I'd be in the same space with. But at the same time, like going back to my hotel room and just like feeling so sad.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Hello, so happy to have you listen in today to this incredible conversation that I'm having with somebody I have not seen for many years. You'll hear a little bit more of how we know each other, but the reality is that I'm just super excited to be at least seeing her here, even though you guys are just listening to us. We're actually seeing each other on camera right now. This is Carolina Ravassa, who I will be chatting with today. She is originally from Cali, Colombia, where I am from as well, and that's why we know each other. We went to the same school, although years apart in grades. She is an actor. She's a voiceover actor, as well as having her own web series, which she actually has produced and directed and starred in as well. And Carolina, you won a Imagen Award for that. Did you know? Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Is that how you say it? You say Imagen or Imagen? How do I say that?
Imagen Award. Yeah, it's
Imagen
Imagen in
Award.
Spanish, but it's Latin
Imagen
American
Award
awards
for
in Hollywood,
Hispano.
yeah.
I never get. I always say it wrong. Hispano.
Hispanglosaxon.
Hispanglosaxon, and it is the funniest thing ever, especially if you're Latina, or any minority to some extent, honestly, to watch that. The second reason too that it's so it's like that part, and if you're an actor too in the air, and ever have been like stereotyped, it's like the most amusing.
Yeah.
I love it. So you're so creative. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm
Excited to
so
be
glad.
here.
It's so funny because, like, when I reached out to you, was really just for you to, like, connecting with you for something else, to ask you something for my brother. And then I'm like, wait, would you like to be on my podcast? And you're like, sure, I have something I'd love to share. And I love what we're going to be talking about, because it's really those parallel worlds and stuff of how it is you have this online persona and at the same time connecting with your fans and so forth. But let's talk a little bit more about you. So take us into your upbringing and then where you've lived. You've moved a few times, and so let's go there first.
So I was born and raised in Cali, Colombia, which is where I met you, because the first play I ever did as a young child actor in our high school was, it was a school that went from kindergarten all the way to senior year. That's why we connected, right? And the acting bug bit me then. I got to play Gretel opposite you as Maria in The Sound of Music, which was really beautiful.
So cute. And you were the most adorable little, and yeah, I probably haven't seen you since like in person. I haven't seen you since. I've just seen you grow up on social
Online.
media.
Yeah,
Online.
exactly. But I grew up in Colombia with a multilingual and multicultural household, because one of my grandmas was from Wisconsin. My other grandfather, who I never met, was from Spain, but my dad kind of incorporated a lot of that cultural stuff into our lives. And then the other half is Colombian, so we spoke English and Spanish at home, and I felt very much a bit of both. So when it came time to go to college, I my mom and her sisters and my sisters had applied to colleges in the US, so I knew I wanted to study acting, and I ended up going to Boston, and I studied there for 4 years in Boston College. And right after that, I moved to New York City to continue a year of like an acting conservatory program. and then I ended up staying because, well, New York is daunting at the beginning, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my god, I love this city, and so I stayed there for 10 years.
That's
Uh,
amazing.
yeah,
That's amazing. So because you're right in terms of that it is daunting. It can be overwhelming, the immensity of it. Um and but it's also like I don't know if what it is you that drew you to stay aside from the fact that you're an actor. Of course, all the possibilities of stage performance as well as
yeah,
other things that are there, right? But was the cultural component that is there is so diverse, especially from where we come from, that is very limited, that
absolutely.
exposure to cultures. So what was it that made you just like make call it your home for 10 years?
Well, I think that in college I started meeting people from India, Kuwait, Argentina, all Filipinos, Brazilians, Japanese. Like in Colombia we have a tiny tiny bit of immigrant populations. Like there's the Jewish community, there's a few
Like
Japanese, there's
what?
Chinese,
Yeah.
there's Lebanese.
Yeah,
But like
in your class it'd be like one
one.
person that is,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they're also very much Colombianized at this point, or that's what we felt. So I didn't get this diversity, and in college I felt it. And then I also did an exchange program with the Brazilian university for 6 months, where I learned Portuguese and like tried to do capoeira and Afro-Brazilian dance and all sorts of fun things. And so culturally I was already like, oh my god, loving all of that and feeling really connected. So when I got to New York, and then I can go to a Brazilian restaurant and practice my Portuguese, and then I can bump into an Italian dude on the street and be like, oh my gosh, like you just feel like you're being bombarded by just people in the street from all different places, and also just theater every night, films, music. You can go into any bar and see live music. And so that was just like, oh my gosh,
Mm,
like this sensory overload, which was so magical.
that's so awesome. Now, when you were there, what part of New York were, in case of the listeners, like what part of New York were you
Yeah.
in? And was it like, were you in the Latino section or in the multicultural? Like, where were you?
I lived in Astoria, Queens for the first 3 years, and I was in the Greek section next to the
Oh,
really
you were
good.
not in the Colombian section? You didn't go
No,
to the
be-
little empanadas around and
I mean, I found an apartment where I found it, so it was a good price. It was safe, so I
Perfect.
felt like that was where it was. But I'd go to Jackson Heights and get Colombian food and stuff. And then I moved to Williamsburg for a couple of years, and that was closer to the city. So it was just, gosh, when you're schlepping. Yeah, I'm Jewish now. I'm schlepping all my stuff on the subway, back and forth, and then you're just like you live with this huge backpack on your shoulders. Living closer to the city or to auditions helped. So that was Williamsburg in Brooklyn, and then I moved to Bushwick, and that's where I kind of spent my last 4 years of New York, which was really awesome because I loved Bushwick.
So
Still
let's
part of
talk
Brooklyn.
about all this now that you ended up adding that. Okay, that sounded like your agent, but FYI. That
Yeah,
voice was your agent
yeah.
inspiration right there, in your
Web
Hispanglo.
series, yeah.
I can never say your series name. I'm like I have to read it to be able to say it. Porque quiero
Well,
decir
so
como
the trick is
Yeah, tell me.
Hispanic.
Hispanglo.
I'm
Yes.
Hispanic and Anglo-Saxon. So
Okay, so
Hispanglo-Saxon. Yeah.
Hispanglo-Saxon. So you create a whole bunch of different characters there in that. So let's go into that aspect of you then um realizing that you were being either typecast or things like that as you were going out on auditions and things like that. Let's talk a little bit of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a paler Latina, if you will, and because of my Spanish, we did a 23andMe, and we're 92% Southern European, which means Spain. So angular features, I don't look what the Hollywood considers stereotypical Mexican or Puerto
And
Rican.
you're blonde. You were like white-haired when you were
Yeah, yeah.
4
I
years old,
I
like
joke that I look like
blonde.
a little Scandinavian boy when I was a
Yes,
kid.
yes.
And so I would go show up to auditions where they wanted a Latina, and casting was so confused. They're like, "You were signed in for the wrong role. Do you speak Spanish?" And I'd be like, "Yes." And they're like, "Are you sure?" And I'd be like, "Are you questioning me, lady?" And so, but then
You
I'd
had
be auditioning with people like it'd be an audition with two people, and then this
contrast.
cute, very looking Puerto Rican girl would walk in, or Mexican, and they didn't speak Spanish because they grew up in the States, but their parents were Mexican, and but the casting director would not dare ask them if they spoke Spanish because it looked like they
Mm.
did. So then all of a sudden I find myself in an improv for a commercial, and I'm doing my Spanish, and they're like super stuck with 3 words, and I'm going, How ironic that you're questioning my Spanish, but you don't question theirs, because yes, we look like the
Interesting.
opposite. So after a while, I just got completely disheartened, because it wasn't just at commercials. It was for film and TV, for theater, for a bunch of things where, like, man, they just, the feedback wasn't, oh, you know what, she just wasn't like, her acting wasn't good enough. They always tell my manager she was great, great audition, she just didn't look Latina enough. And like, I'm sure some casting directors probably were like, hey, that audition sucked, but the feedback was always she wasn't Hispanic enough.
About your looks. Yeah. Incredible.
So I just reached a point where, I was kind of having an identity crisis. Like, what am I? I feel Colombian, I feel American, but nobody wants to accept me as either. And even agents were like, I can't represent you because, I just don't know how to sell you. You're not, you're not Latina enough. You're not Caucasian enough. And it was just like, so I just decided to do I thought it was going to be drama. I turned it to sketch comedy,
You,
which was great.
you thought your YouTube thing was going to be drama? Your YouTube series?
Look, I wrote out all the episodes and they were dramatic. Like, I literally wrote out what happened to me. So I didn't change the words. It was just like, a scene that had happened to me. I would write it out. And then as I started acting it, like, I play myself, and then the opposite character, who's in a wig and whatever, that character started making funny faces. And then there would be like, I would hold on certain reaction shots. And then in the end, it was like, this is funny because it's unbelievable. But I
Yes.
realized that as I started editing. I didn't know when I went in that this was going to be like funny. So
That is
then I leaned into that,
hilarious.
because nobody wants to watch 3-minute little dramatic pieces. They want to watch comedy. People want to watch
That's
comedy.
awesome. And you would just film yourself. You would do everything yourself. Everything.
Yeah,
All the
literally
editing, filming. How
everything.
long would it take you for one episode? Each episode is about what, 5
Three to
minutes?
4 minutes.
5 minutes. Yeah. So how long would it take you the process of recording yourself being different characters plus the editing
Yeah.
plus all that?
I never like quantified that, but like, so I took a while writing them out. So I had all that organized, and I'd already done some little test shots with like, okay, this wig, because I went through phases like, this wig could be the manager. No, 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 wait, what if I use this wig? So I kind of like was borrowing wigs. So I was trying to figure out which one made sense more for each character. Once I was shooting, it would take about 3 hours to shoot the whole episode. So first I would shoot Carolina going in, doing her thing, make sure I had all of those shots. Then I would turn it around and I'd put on the wig and do the character, and I would shoot a bunch of that. So like, and usually after I'd shoot the 3 hours, I'd be a little tired. So I'm like, okay, I'll look at this later. And then the next day I'd go in and start piecing it together. Um, but yeah, it's funny. Like an
Amazing.
episode of 3 minutes can take, you know, maybe 6 hours to do. But I was also very basic. Like, I wasn't using fancy sound. I was literally just using the iPhone microphone. I didn't have fancy lights. I would always shoot in daylight because I didn't have lights. So it wasn't like a full set where it just is more complicated. This was like super handmade. And that's why, like, at the beginning of my series, I would write, made with an iPhone, iMovie, and borrowed wigs, to let people know, like, this isn't about fancy production value. It's about the story and the characters,
Yes.
because I'm not trying to be Hollywood here.
No, and that I think speaks so much because that's the thing. A lot of times, any of us and anything that we do, we limit ourselves to be like fully prepared to do anything in life. Like, we're like, no, until I have this, until I have this.
Uh-huh.
And we stop ourselves and limit ourselves from being able to achieve. When I started this podcast, I had no clue what I was going to do. I was just started interviewing. Then I'll figure out how it is I'm going to do the,
Yeah.
post production, all that. I'll figure it out. You figure it out as you go along. And that's, I think, sometimes what we have to do. Because if not, then we hinder so much creativity and other
Yeah.
things that could come up. So that's awesome that you just did it that way. So you're still recording some of these episodes. You've moved since. So we're going to that, but there's going to
Yeah.
be a few chapters now. We're going to start touching on the aspects of the grief component,
Yeah.
relationships, and as well as with moving and stuff.
Yeah.
So what, are you done filming that? Are you still shooting some episodes and now in LA that you're in LA?
I, so I did 2 seasons in New York. Then I went through horrible heartbreak where I was
Mhm.
kind of reorganizing my life. That first year was just like dealing with a lot of grief. And then the year after, I moved to LA, and I was kind of figuring out my bearings here. So it almost took me 2 years to then go, hey, I miss my characters. So I decided to do an extra season, and I thought that was going to be the last one. I kind of, at the end, the last episode is Carolina calling them like a cease and desist, like stop impersonating me. It's kind of a joke. It's all inside jokes within myself. It's kind of ridiculous. But then the pandemic hit. And I thought, what more perfect than to shoot myself in my house because nobody else is here and I'm by myself. And so I kind of made a joke about how the character, like Carolina, gets depressed during the pandemic because she can't go to Comic Cons to meet fans. So then the characters have to create how-to videos for YouTube, hoping to go viral to pay the bills. So I kind of just create these scenarios so that to put them in uncomfortable situations, and then the characters are like, "This is how you cook pasta. This is how you do a makeup tutorial," and they're obviously all failures. So I kind of was setting them up to fail on purpose. And that was the last one. I think I published them in May or June, and that's been it for now.
I love how you said that you missed your characters. It's like they become like this other, like a companion, right? It's
Yep.
like this conversation with yourself, with like, especially with the pandemic. If you're like by yourself, I don't know if you have a roommate or whatever, but it's like you're like, oh my gosh, it's like I guess I could just at least talk to my characters,
My
have these
characters.
conversations. And you're right, like if there were no auditions for a while too, then it's something
Yeah.
else that you could at least still be using your talents in some way.
It was almost the
um
perfect project to do by
yes.
myself in my apartment without any help, because literally that's how I had been doing it. So I didn't need to go shoot on the street. I had all my wigs here. I had my iPhone here. It was like, it was a perfect little
That's
isolated
perfect.
environment. Yeah.
Perfect. Now, let me ask you, with being from home, being your voiceover actor, do you record at home or do you have to go to studio when you record for voiceover?
I used to always go into the studios to record actual bookings. For auditions, I have a little microphone that I set up here and audition with. But when the pandemic hit, they were basically saying, if you don't have a home studio setup, we can't have you audition. So I bought a microphone and I set it up in my tiny closet, and I record in my closet now. So I've
Wait,
recorded Nickelodeon and Disney and Cartoon Network from my closet.
from your closet. And
Yeah.
then your character, the one that we're also gonna that people know you from Comic Con, is Sombra.
Hmm.
Um, so from Overwatch. So do you that one you go into record, or do you still even have to record, or is it already pretty much what you've recorded is what they use and edit for any kind of episode that they
Yeah.
do in the games? I don't even know.
For her
Because I
and
don't
for
play. My son plays video
it's
games. I
it's
don't.
yeah, for Sombra and Raze, another one that I do for Riot Games. They have what we call what is called downloadable content. So every couple months, new voice lines come out. So yes, we do record, here and there for new stuff. And Overwatch 2 is in the making, so that's like another project that I'll be recording for. But uh, we go into their studios for that. They've been actually, I lie. I've recorded some from my closet. Sometimes, depending on what is ebbing and flowing during the pandemic, they have us go into a studio because it can be very safe. We're just in a booth by ourselves, or we record from home, depending on what they prefer. So it's been a
So
mix. Yeah.
so when you were in New York, did they have a studio there as well? So they have studios in LA and they have studios in New York?
They have Blizzard is based here in California, but they just hire out a recording studio that
Okay.
they work with, because they have people in London, they have people in Egypt, they have people in France. So I think it's just like they have a recording studio they work with, and they source connect and do the session, and
That's
that's it. But it's not
perfect.
like Blizzard has, I think maybe Blizzard has offices in Glasgow or something, but it's like,
Okay, okay. So they
yeah.
just hire out other episodes. Okay. So let's go back again to New York. You had established yourself. That was your life. So 10 years you're there. You create friendships, relationships, love.
Yes.
Let's talk about love, breakup, and being still in the public eye in these Comic Cons. And how do you deal with having to deal with your emotions at the same time as
Yeah.
being, here with fans and so forth? So, where do you want to start with all that?
Yeah, well, the timing was really insane. The whole, basically the whole 10 years that I was in New York, I had a partner. And it was towards the last maybe 4 years that we lived together. But we were these hippies that were maybe never going to move in together. But so New York for me was 10 years with this person, and Sombra came out in November, and in December he broke my heart. So all of a sudden, my Twitter is growing, my Instagram's growing. I'm getting invited to Comic Cons, and they're planning for, March, we'd love you in Houston. April, we'd like you in Las Vegas. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and like it's the first time that I'm kind of getting uh any sort of recognition for my acting work, and then I've been being invited to speak on panels at Comic Cons and stuff. And so it was like thank you universe for sending me this, but also, oh my god, I can't I want to fully enjoy this, and it's really hard because I am so devastated. um so I remember, I think the first trip I did was to South by Southwest, because I got invited to speak there as a Latina in video games. And I remember just, walking the streets of Austin, wanting to enjoy the live music, but like just feeling so empty, and and it was just like that was 3 months into my breakup. So like, I'm sorry, let me silence this. So after 10 years of being with somebody, and then like I'm just in the third month of this grief, right? So I would put my face together for like the panel, and oh my god, Sombra, I love you so much. Oh my god, Sombra, you've helped me during this time. Oh my god, so, and I'd be like, thank you, thank you, thank you, and the happiness and joy and fulfillment was absolutely authentic, because I am in the present moment experiencing this and listening to
Mm-hmm.
them. And I got to be there with the writer of Overwatch, who we did a panel together, and he's just brilliant, and he wanted to go out to dinner to these like great barbecue places, and I'm there just going, yes, just focus on the present moment, Ravassa, because or else you're going to crumble. But like, I'd go back to the apartment where I was staying, and I'd just fall apart,
Mm.
because then it was like after this huge high,
Yes,
you're
the
alone,
crash.
and then
Yeah.
all the adrenaline stops, and you're like, "Ugh," so that year was the craziest dichotomy for me. I was like enjoying meeting new people, voice actors. I was meeting famous people left and right that went to these Comic Cons. Like I met Chris Hemsworth, like just bumping into people that I never thought I'd be in the same space with. But at the same time, like going back to my hotel room and just like feeling so sad. Um,
Like just the loneliness, and so also not having somebody to be able to share what you had just experienced that day, to come home to that as well.
yeah.
Did you feel that?
Absolutely. I mean, it was
Mm.
it was just this roller coaster of emotions, because again, people say, "Oh, so like is it authentic when you meet fans?" And I'm like, "Absolutely," because I'm looking into their eyes, and they're telling me their personal story of how Overwatch has affected them, and I'm so in the moment. And we'll get into that. I love I I want to talk to you about this too, because like it's just so interesting how some people have been helped to get through grief with video games. So that was something that I was really fascinated by. So it's almost like I helped the fans and
You
they
were
helped
helping them,
me.
and they were that is so beautiful. That
Yeah,
when you mentioned that that's what we were gonna be talking about, I was like, "Wow, I love that." It's like we never know the impact we're having on somebody else's life, and vice versa in those
yeah,
connecting moments, right?
yeah,
So yeah, they were filling your cup
yeah,
in ways, in at least distracting, and at the same time showing you love,
yeah,
right? While you were going through so much pain, but you were doing the same for them.
yeah.
So that's
And
so
it was,
pretty.
it was a really great reason to get up and out of bed. You had to show your face at Comic-Con, right? And like I was always very driven, and like I got my shit together real fast, and like, okay, I'm gonna redo my apartment, and paint this wall and change stuff around, because I needed to create my own home. But I was also all of a sudden paying rent by myself, of an apartment that had been paid for by two people. So it was almost, the timing was crazy, that I would get to travel for 4 days of the month to somewhere, and I would Airbnb my apartment. So that's how I'd make ends
Mm.
meet. Because people think Blizzard has employed us, and all of a sudden, we're famous Sombra, and so we have a ton of money. But like, that's not the case at all. I get paid
Mhm.
my session fees, and I'm still living my starving artist life. So I was like, how the hell am I going to make ends meet? So I was
Mhm.
being really resourceful. Okay, I'm traveling to Houston these days. This is when I'm gonna rent my apartment. And luckily, I had a really cute apartment, so it would rent every time.
And New York City, absolutely.
So I would cover, a good portion of the rent with that, and then I'd come back and clean. Like, I was a little cleaning lady for the place, for the when they would arrive. And then, it was just like I was doing a lot that year to kind of keep it moving. And I made sure to go to yoga every day, no matter what would happen. I knew I had to roll out of bed and do that if it was the only thing I did, because I knew that that kept me breathing deeply.
Let's talk more about that. Okay, so
Yeah,
you just touched on something so important. These were the tools then that you were using in your grief journey. And by the way, like this is so important that we talk about breakups and relationships being an aspect of grief, because people have this idea, and we, maybe you had this with friends and stuff, like, oh, move on, he didn't deserve you, those kind of things, just kind of
yeah,
like brushing it away. Yet people don't do that when it comes necessarily to divorce. But in long term in relationships, when it's not
yeah.
marriage,
Marriage.
there it's a little more discarded, and they don't
Uh-huh.
really take into consideration the amount of commitment and emotional commitment and other things too, because you've already created your whole life in your head of your future is going to look like, and then all of a sudden the rug is pulled from under you. So
Yeah.
let's talk. So yoga, you had been practicing yoga for many. Did you practice yoga in Colombia, or did you only start when you came to the States? You're good, because you've done for modeling for yoga too, right? Shots for that,
Yeah, just for,
photography
yeah, for
for
fun.
fun.
Yeah.
You're so good, beautiful poses. The ones you've posted, I'm like, gosh, they're stunning.
You know, it's funny. I started yoga in college. I mean, I think I did a few little yoga exercises while doing theater in Colombia, but I didn't understand what it could do.
Hmm.
I started yoga in college because I had heard it was good for, anxiety. And my first semester of college, I was actually very depressed. Um, or I don't know if depression is the word. Maybe I was just sad. I can't like
Might have
say
been
now.
grieving. You might
Yeah,
have been grieving. You had just moved from
grieving,
your
moving.
home. You moved away from your parents,
Yeah,
living.
winter.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally
So,
different culture,
so
weather, everything. Mhm.
yeah, and I was studying more than I'd ever studied in my life, and it was hard to keep up, and so I went to this one yoga class when I first got to college, and after a few months of me feeling really down, and I just remember crying throughout that whole yoga class silently. It wasn't like the teacher was like, observing, but I just remember like us breathing so deeply. I was just like and I was releasing stuff, and at the end the yoga teacher's like, "You guys are all so beautiful." And I remember thinking, "Oh my God, thank you." And I walked out of there like I was walking on air. Like for the first time, I had taken a really freaking deep breath and just settled. And then I was like, yoga's magic. Because I just needed to as actors we need to breathe through everything we do, but this was like this whole other level of releasing stress and toxins and hell. And so then I realized, okay, I need yoga in my life. And it took me a few years to understand, oh, I need yoga every day to to work as a proper functioning human being, because I would do it and then I'd forget, and I'd work out because I'd always work out at the gym, but I wouldn't do yoga for weeks, and then I'd go back and do it and I'd be like, wait, why don't I do this? And it wasn't until I was living in Brazil that I started doing these classes, these Ashtanga classes with a fabulous teacher, that like made me realize like how much more advanced it could be. So I started connecting back to my gymnastics when I was in 6th grade, and I was doing handstands and forearm stands and all these things. And I was like, oh, yoga is mental, but it can also be this very
Physical.
challenging physical
Mhm.
thing. So I kind of connected like the really complicated stuff physically with how the mental clarity it gives you. And now, like since then, I realized I want to do yoga 5 times a week, and I've been doing it like that for like 15 years.
So 5 times a week for 15 years. It's like your meditate, it's
It's
like prayer
exactly,
or meditation or anything. Do you feel like yoga is your spiritual practice?
absolutely.
It is for you, it's
Absolutely.
your spiritual.
Because and sometimes I try to do a whole yoga class with my eyes closed. Like I'll just listen to the teacher and I'll do the things. Of course, if I need to handstand, I'm not going to do my eyes closed, but I just go in somewhere and I just do the things and breathe deeply. And sometimes the muscles burn, but you just keep going. Um, and for me, it's been helpful, And I remember during my breakup, a friend was saying, "Go to a boxing class. You need to release anger." And
Mhm.
and I went to a boxing class and it did nothing for me. And I thought, no, I don't. I mean, yes, I'm angry, but I need to breathe through my stuff, not punch through it. So I think everybody finds what they need, like runners, or I love rollerblading too. That gives me joy. So, it's like what is going to connect you to your mind and body, I think is what gets you
Yeah,
through
your
really
emotion.
difficult
Yeah,
times.
what's gonna and it's not the same for everybody. You're absolutely right. Now you mentioned teachers, so you normally do yoga with an instructor, or do you follow your own? practice
Well,
too?
yeah, I was doing it with teachers, and then I got certified to teach yoga in New York. And I thought, okay, I'll be a yoga teacher while I'm pursuing my acting career. And I taught for a while, but yoga teaching is its own career, and I realized, like, if I'm going to do this, I need to be committed 100%. And it was just too much to do both. So, and then I started not liking yoga because I was teaching it too much and not practicing enough. So now I just practice yoga. I've been going to studios for years. And during the pandemic, we started doing it at home. So I do like putting a video on because I like getting challenged, and I like following some guidance, not having to think
Mm.
about what I'm going to do. Just take me on a journey that I'm not planning, because I fall into the same routine by myself. Even though I can create a yoga class by myself, I kind of like being led. And there's some poses I hate, so I'll never want to do them on my own. But if the teacher says, "Okay, do camel pose," you're like, "Okay, fine, I'll do camel pose." So I kind of need that kick in the butt, and that's why YouTube has been a lifesaver.
Savior.
Yeah,
I I love what you said, that taking me on a journey. It just made me think of even just why we even watch movies, or why we do,
yeah.
things like that. It's that aspect of sometimes we just need to be just taken on these journeys to be able to even connect with certain things of ourselves. So I don't know. When you said that, I thought of
Well,
that.
and I also like, without getting like hokey pokey in the universe, I think that I've had experiences
Can't
where,
you have why can't you get
because no,
let's just get a
because
hokey pokey. Let's
totally,
get
totally.
hokey
But
pokey.
I also believe yoga can help the really grounded mind. So then they get like turned off by it. But like, I've had moments where a yoga teacher who I've never met and who doesn't know anything about my life is trying to, create a metaphor for this position. And she says, when we open our hearts up, this is what happens, and then vulnerability and whatever. And then all of a sudden you do a heart opener, and I'm here dealing with my heartbreak, and I'm just like, and immediately I start crying. And it's not
Yes.
because it's like, almost like there are positions that release certain things. Like, women also retain a lot of stress in the hips, so when we do hip openers, it's like letting out stuff. So, and men in the shoulders. So once you learn these things, and you're like, oh, I need certain positions to like release certain things. And for me, it was beautiful that, like, this teacher who doesn't know me is explaining something, and it's totally speaking to me personally, and I needed that day. um one Oh my god, one crazy example was, I was, again, that year was so hard in New York. The subsequent years have been hard. It's been 4 years, and
There's no time for grief,
right.
and honestly, and even I mean, this happens even with people that are widows or widowers. They still are grieving their loved one, even if they found somebody else, because there's still
I
an
know.
aspect of that. There's something that you still are missing, of course. So yeah, don't the time is nothing. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I guess
So
I
that
always
first
think
year,
like that first year was hard, and then I'm like, nah, the first
uh,
3 years were hard.
yeah.
And that, I remember, just it was, everything seemed like a dark cloud. But I would go to my yoga class. And I went to this one, and the teacher is, having us go into handstands, because she says that sometimes we have to change the perspective, and see things upside down. And I had been silently crying in the back through that whole class, because I just like couldn't get it together. And then we try that handstand, and I get up in the handstand. Holy cow. I hold that handstand like a metal rod for like a minute, like straight. And I was just in awe of myself. I'd never held it. I don't think I've ever held a handstand like that ever again. It was just this, like, my hands were these grounded roots, because she was saying that they were like the roots of a tree upside down, right?
It
Because usually it's our
empowered you.
feet, but
It
this was our
empowered
hands.
you.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I just remember thinking, man, no matter how sad or weak I feel, my body's telling me I'm so strong and that I can
Mm.
do it. And for me, it was just like, it just changed my day, that little action. And I was like, oh my God, I can do this. And of course, the next day I felt like crap again, because it is this ebb and flow. But I just remember thinking, okay, little victories every day kind of
Yes.
make it all up.
Yes. No, that's such a good and you said that she made you guys stand up to see things in different perspective, and it did that for you because you saw really that as much as you were going through so much heartbreak and that you felt so weak, you actually
Yeah.
were strong. So it changed your perspective being
Hmm.
on that in that pose. And yeah, you probably would have not had that had you done that pose on your own.
Yeah.
It was the words accompanied with the action, the words of the instructor accompanied. So yeah. So
Yeah.
yoga, then huge part of your journey and your tools and your grief journey.
Yeah.
Your friendships, is that your family?
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that and what other tools.
I mean, I've been really lucky that since our childhood, my mom and dad, but my dad specifically, was always like, "Your sisters are going to be your best friends always," because we would fight a lot as kids, and so he was trying to remind us that we had to make friends with our sisters. And as we grew older, we started understanding each other differently. And my right after the breakup, my older sister was supposed to fly back to Europe, but she asked her job if she could work remotely and flew to New York to be with me because this was, like you said, it was a relationship. And so people didn't see it like, oh, a divorce, but it was a 10-year relationship. So that's like a freaking marriage.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
she came to help me clean up my apartment, move stuff around, change the energy, make it my own. And my little sister was already living in New York. What a cutie. She went to pick me up at 4 a.m. in a rented car. So I wouldn't have to like deal with a subway alone. Like we came to each other's rescue. So that was really beautiful. And then I've just had really good girlfriends my whole life. And all of a sudden you create this clan of witches or coven,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
and since then, every one of my girlfriends has gone through a breakup, and we all just like show up when it's needed, because that it can be so hard, especially after a really long relationship that you thought was going to take you into the rest of your life.
Mhm.
So I've always prided myself in creating really good friendships, because they've shown up, and I show up when they need me, and vice versa. So, and of course my parents, but they were in Colombia, so we'd FaceTime and we'd talk. But I think that when people just show up with a bottle of wine at your house, you're like, thanks, I needed that. Um,
And that's something important that you just said, is not even just not everybody has to show up the same way. Some people is that
yeah,
gesture of just like,
yeah,
hey, Carolina, I want to go to a movie, or you want to, that showing up with the bottle of wine, like you said, that speaks to you. Everything is going to be a little bit different as to how people are going to support you. Your sister driving, to pick you up, the other one leaving her job from, in
yeah,
Europe to be with you. Everybody just serves in a different way, and it doesn't have to look all the same,
yeah.
because you don't need 10 people leaving their jobs and moving in with you.
Right. You don't want that. Exactly.
You
Yeah,
don't want that.
yeah,
Yeah. You want some of the people that are just going to be the ones that you're going to call, and they're just going to make you laugh, like not talk
yeah,
about your breakup at all, like
yeah,
that's your therapy, that you're going to
yeah.
chat with them and talk, and others that are, yeah. So it's different what we all can offer somebody that is grieving.
And what's interesting? That was one of the things that I was able to kind of grasp onto and relate to fans, because uh, I think we'll weave in and out of the
Oh, well,
how
yeah,
it
this is
went
not
with them.
linear. I always tell
Yeah,
people my conversations are not linear, just as grief is
like grief,
not. So
exactly.
I don't
Um,
know. People can fast forward if they think we've talked too much about whatever. That's up to them what they want to
yeah.
do with this episode. But I just have a conversation.
Because what happened was, I remember, at the beginning, most fans kind of express how much they love Sombra and how much everything's so great. And then all of a sudden, in all that joy, somebody comes up and says, I was suicidal, and playing Overwatch really helped me and actually saved me. And then all of a sudden, you have to switch gears, and you have to be very
Mm.
present and listen and go, oh, wow, I'm so sorry. And I'm not a therapist, so I was like, shit, what do I respond to this?
What did you, and what would you respond in those kind of situations?
Well, at the beginning, I was just, I kind of was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so glad, Overwatch was able to help you, thank you for sharing that. And we'd hug, and I'd look in their eyes, and I'd tell them how amazing I thought they were, or highlight something, those eyelashes are so beautiful. And then they'd feel, oh my gosh, Sombra said this about me, and I don't feel beautiful, but I want to believe her. And then I realized, when one kid came up and he said he'd felt suicidal, I looked at him, and he was so tall. I just remember he was like 7 feet tall, but I put my hands up on his shoulders and I said, promise me that the next time you're feeling down, you're going to reach out, or feeling these dark thoughts, you're going to reach out to somebody that you love and that loves you and that can help you. Because um, I said, you can write to me on Instagram, but I can't respond to all the messages. And if I don't see your message, that's not going to be good. So you need to reach out to the people who you have in your life in this moment that take care of you, because a lot of fans meet us and think that we have the answers to life, which we don't. Just because we've succeeded, and they think that we have the secret to the universe, but we don't. As I'm telling you, I was grieving while they thought everything was fine in my life. And
Mhm.
I wasn't trying to hide that part of my life, but I wasn't ready to share it either. And so for me, it's been very important to remind them that, they can't expect one meeting with us to change everything. So they need to have their own network of support that makes sense in Arkansas, in Ohio, in wherever they live. Because me living in LA, I'm not going to be able to help them when they need it. If at 2 a.m. they're thinking suicidal thoughts, who can they call that already knows that they've been going through this and they need that companion at that moment? Let it be a friend, a partner, a parent, a grandmother. And so that was, for me, it was very clear. Like, I could call certain people at 2 a.m. and I would call other people at 5 a.m. Like,
Mhm.
who do you call when? And just kind of have that ready to go. And if you don't have friends, because so many people say, I don't have friends, let's make an effort to start making friends.
Mhm.
Connect with that friend online that you're playing Overwatch with, and start sharing with them, and maybe they'll be your close friend, and then you'll start opening up, because that's what it is. People think they can't trust somebody, but it's like, as soon as we open up to be more vulnerable, that's when we're going to start sharing these things, and maybe realizing, oh, I felt the same. Oh my
Yep.
God,
Yep.
let's help each other through this. How beautiful is that?
It's so true. I think that that's the key. Vulnerability just opens up that window of connection that, like you said, like we never realize somebody else has gone through something we have until we share that we've gone through something so hard. Like,
Yes.
it's like people don't realize. So yeah, that's true. And that's a really good way of really making close friendships, because you're sharing something that's personal and connecting in this kind of soul level to somebody else, and that can create those bonds. Now, I'm so glad that you would tell them to create their own circle of support,
Yeah.
because that must have felt so heavy on your shoulders to be this Carolina, as an actor here, people seeing you as this persona that's suddenly going to save them, because Sombra is a badass, right? That's
Totally.
her character.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So if they think that this character is you, you know, it's like, and it's like you can't save them. They have to save themselves, and to have that responsibility. Oh, I can't even imagine the overwhelm at the beginning when you're getting this, until you kind of found how to be able to communicate with them. Like, how were you navigating
yeah,
these emotions and getting home after you've come from a Comic Con? You've had this, again, back again to the word dichotomy that you've mentioned, of these emotions, people being like, oh my God, you're like the biggest, this. And then others being like, I was about to take my life, yet
yeah.
Overwatch saved me. How did you come to terms to
I
that?
mean, I think it's been a process. I think that luckily, even talking, like, so when we go to cons, there's, other guests that are there. So we all sit at these tables, and then we break for lunch. And so we'll see each other in the green room. And sometimes it'll be like, holy cow, I just met somebody who, da 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 da. And they go, oh man, and what would you say? Well, I said this. Oh wow, this happened to me once, and I did this. And I'm like, oh my God, that's brilliant. Thank you. Like, it's almost like we start sharing information on how to properly be there for somebody when they are, saying this kind of stuff. Um, I think that there's been different ways. At the beginning, I think that because I was also going through my grief, I would, at the end of the day, need to get back to my hotel room and sit in a tub for a while. you know
Decompress.
I
Decompress,
joke,
yeah.
either you need to sit in the tub and crash, or you need like a bottle of tequila. But I think that there was a lot of release on my end, like letting out my sadness, but also like everything you received in the day, because it was 8 hours of nonstop interaction where you're being very present for everybody who comes up to your table. So yes, and it still is difficult. Like, after a day of a con, you're like, get me a glass of wine, because it's just, regardless if it's not any negative stories or dark stuff, it can be taxing and exhausting, right? But I think that
Absolutely.
I've just learned that people want to be heard, and people want to
Mm,
be seen. So a lot of times I don't have to have the perfect answer. they just want to share, hey, Sombra, so I was going through postpartum depression, and while I was dealing with this, my husband would take the baby for 2 hours a day, and I would play Overwatch, and Overwatch got me through it. And I'd be like, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And they're like, yeah, and I'm doing really well now. And here's my baby. Can you boop him on the nose? So I'd boop the baby. And it sometimes people weren't looking for answers. They just wanted to share that. And then that was just beautiful to hear. Um, but I also think that I've taken from my own experience and been able to say, some days really suck. And some days you just want to stay in bed and not do anything, and that's okay. But you wake up the next morning and do something that you love. Go on a walk or call that friend. Or, like there are different coping mechanisms, and being able to relay that, one of our friends on Overwatch publicly mentions he's got anxiety issues. So anytime we talk about that on a panel, he says, guys, there's nothing that a cold or a hot shower isn't going to help. And if you're getting two in your head, get up, move around, take yourself for a walk, because we get locked up in here and then we don't know what to do. But we need to move the body, get back into your body. And so it's cute because he's trying to, share this because it's how he deals with anxiety. And so I want to share how I've dealt with grief if they're dealing with that, because we all have different coping mechanisms, and some people drink and some people, but I do think that there are ways that everyone can find what works best for them.
Yeah, and some are escape mechanisms, some are coping, some are escape, right? So it's also determining at what point our escape that we think that is a way of also helping us cope is actually just a way of not dealing. So
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
balance,
Yeah.
right, too, which can happen as well. I'm sure in the video gaming world is a lot of times it's like, let me just go on this alternate reality because I don't want to deal with my own.
Yeah.
And when it goes for too long, then that's a problem,
Yeah.
right? If it's in a way that it's manageable, that you're still be able to deal with your emotions in the present, that's good. Same would happen with alcohol or things like that. If you're not
Mm-hmm.
using that to not have to necessarily deal with your present, then there could
Yeah.
be but you're right, like everybody goes through things and goes through similar things, and it has different tools they use to go through those things. So
Yeah.
sharing is important because yeah, a tool that worked for you might work for me, maybe not, but it might work for my neighbor, and it might work for, it's like you never know. You
Yeah.
never know. So that's amazing that you've learned to be open. Now, talking about the character, are people expecting you when they meet you to be the character? And we're talking about Sombra just because that's the one that you're most
Yeah.
known for in the public eye. So do yeah, or is there like this let me put it this way, and this is going to be like, is there an expectation hangover to some extent for some of the fans when they meet you and they're like, "Oh, wait, you're not exactly that," or is it more like the other way around, like, "Oh my gosh, you're even more awesome than the character?"
Sometimes I think they expect me to be more sassy like Sombra, and then I'm just kind of like a bubble of energy. So they're like, "Oh my god, this is so exciting!" And then they realize that we're more approachable than they thought. Like I think sometimes they're a little intimidated, and then I'm like, "Chill, what's going on?" And I hug them. This was pre-COVID, and so then they'll be like, "Oh, thank you. I didn't think you'd want to hug me," and I'm like, "Why not?"
Like
So
like they wouldn't think you'd be approachable. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like the
yeah.
character is probably not as colder you, but you are warmer. You're
Right.
Latina. You're
Right.
Latina. Now, how about this? Do they get surprised because your character has an accent? Do they get surprised when they realize you don't?
No, and no one's ever, sometimes they go, "Oh wow, I hear Sombra in your normal voice too," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, I mean, I do her, but no, I think sometimes I'll just be like, "Hey, nice to meet you," and then I'll ask what their favorite voice line is because I'm gonna write it on their, autographed print, and then they say, "Oh, I like mess with the best and die like the rest," and so I look at them and I go, "Mess with the best and die like the rest," and they're like, whoa, that was so cool, and so I see them geek out, or they look at their parents like, that's how she does it in the game, and so I think that
Oh.
that's really cute when they, I don't know, all of that, and then they get reminded of like what happens in the game with specific voice lines. So like if I use my ultimate, which is my ultimate power, they go, "Oh my god, that gives me PTSD because I know I'm gonna die because Sombra's gonna kill me." uh, so like it's just funny stuff, but I think that I've had mostly great experiences, I'm trying to think if, like, I don't think I've ever had a negative experience. Like, so I think at one point, one kid was like, you ignore me on social media. And I looked at him and I said,
Oh, man.
have you seen my Instagram? Like, it's impossible to respond to everybody. I don't ignore you. I think it's just, I'm human too. And on weekends, I like to spend time with my family. So I'm not going to stay stuck to my phone looking at everyone's comment. And I also need my life. So if you respect that, and he's like, oh, wow, yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that. Thank you. Like,
Mhm.
so, but besides that, everyone who's come up to me, obviously they're coming up because they like the game and they like Sombra. So if anything, sometimes they just start crying because they're so nervous, or they have a story to tell. One of the ones that really really affected me was this girl came up really shyly, and sh- and then she left, and then she came back later, and then she said, this is for my sister. And I said, okay, what's your sister's name? She said, Kat. So I start writing Kat on the print, and she goes, she died a month ago. And I was like, what? And I thought, oh my God, did I hear wrong? Like, why am I writing this out to her sister who passed? So I looked at her. I said, well, what happened? She goes, she was in a car accident, but I had promised her that I was going to bring her here to meet you. And I was like, and so she starts crying. And so I start crying. And then I get up and I hug her. And she said, but we're Mexican and we're celebrating Day of the Dead soon. So I want to put this print on her altar. And I was like, wow, like, I'm honored that my print's going to be on the altar of your sister's Day of the Dead, you know, celebration. But I was also like, oh my God, what do you do with this? It's like, it's so sad. She was just going to turn 21. Like, what? So I'm hugging her and I'm crying and I'm just telling her, like, make sure you connect with your family right now because it's a really important time. And like, I'm just saying, I guess what I would want to do in that situation, because I can't imagine what else. And so then she leaves, and then I just sit there and I'm like, holy shit, what just happened? So I had to recoup, and luckily the girl, we always get assistants at our table, and she realized what was happening. So she went to the line and said, just give us a second. And because I was like taking extra time with this girl, because how could I not? um
How long ago was this, Carolina? Because it's still something that
oof,
it's affecting you. So how long ago was this?
over a year ago.
Yeah, the amazingness of those emotions, because one of the things is, one, you're hearing sister, right? So she is doing that for your sister. So it's like, even though you have not experienced that, and that's the
Yeah,
thing with grief, like, we may not necessarily, and this is grief in any kind, right? In this case, relating to somebody's grief when somebody's died, you have not experienced that, but you know what it is to have a sister.
yeah,
And you know that aspect. And so relating to that pain, whether we've felt it or not, that is
yeah,
so important, in order, that empathy, right? That
yeah,
empathy component, and you have it so beautifully in you. And I think that that's what makes fans connect with you as
yeah.
well. And it's because you have innate empathy, and it's beautiful. I'm
Well, I also think
hearing
it's
it now.
like, it's a real interaction, right? Like, it's not
Hmm.
just this online thing that you read and you can kind of dismiss. And she's there taking the time to tell me this. Like, I almost feel like if you don't react emotionally, I don't, then you're dead inside. But I remember right after that convention, oh God, I can't remember what state it was in, Kentucky or something. Um,
It's like, welcome, with the concerts. Hello, Kentucky. Oh, wait, no. Hello, Texas.
yeah. But after that, I went to my first convention ever in Bogota, which was really exciting because I got
Oh,
to drag my
cute.
parents. Yeah, and
So the fans, the Colombian fans, see,
yeah,
yeah,
it was
so
crazy. It was
cool.
crazy. And so, that it was a panel, and it was full of people, and my parents were like, and my aunt, what are these kids like? What? They were so confused that they couldn't understand the phenomenon. But I told that story on the panel because they said, what are one of the most, like, what's happened recently that you feel like Sombra's, like, of how it's affected you? And because Sombra also has two Day of the Dead outfits, so like it's just very
Mm.
connected to Mexican culture. And so I told that story, and then I proceed to go sign autographs for 2 hours, and my dad is the freaking cutest. He stood next to a pillar for the whole 2 hours watching me sign autographs. Just like, but he was far away. He couldn't hear what was going on, but he was just like, let's just
Admiring his
like,
daughter.
and the
So
kids coming
cute.
up and shaking, and I'd sign for them, and then I'd hug them, and then they'd be so excited, and then this girl comes up and tells me that that story really moved her because her partner lives in Chile and she's very sick and she doesn't know if she'll ever see her again
Mm.
because she's so sick. And I go, oh fuck. So I make a video for this girl, her girlfriend, and I just say, sending you all the love and strength in the world, because at this point, I don't know if this girl's gonna die, right? So I'm
Mm.
really like, I can't say everything's gonna be fine because that's not it either,
That's a lie.
right?
Yeah, that's a lie.
So I
It's not,
just
and that's not genuine either.
it's not, because I've just been told she's got a maybe a terminal illness. So I say, I'm sending you all the love in the world. I'm here with, what's her name, and kisses and everything. And as the girl walks off, she's just bawling. And my dad, Dianita Carolina, ¿por qué está llorando la niña? Papi, es que me contó una historia súper complicada. Ay, le doy un abrazo, ¿qué hago? No, papi, tú eres un extraño. No, eso es raro, no hagas eso. And
FYI, she's saying like dad's like, what
yeah,
do I do? Do I
do I
hug
hug
her?
her?
Do I
And it's like, no, Dad, you're a stranger. Don't do that. But then a month later, I got a message on Instagram saying, "Hey, like she's okay," and I was like, "Thank God." Yeah, So these crazy experiences where you trigger something in somebody to share, and that's the other phenomenon that I think happens at cons when you're meeting somebody that you admire. For some reason, I think that people feel like it's a safe space to
Mhm.
share their deepest darkest secrets, or like, not because we're going to give them a solution. Maybe sometimes I do think they think we have the answers to everything, but just, I really admire you and I need you to know this thing about me because I need to share it. And so then I am there with that information, and it's that's why I was so interested in this grief thing. It's like, this is people sharing their grief to a
Mhm.
complete stranger, but because they admire me or love Sombra, they want to tell Sombra this, do you know?
Mhm. It
Yeah,
feels like it's like somebody that can hold it's again holding space for somebody. You be somebody's holding space for your thoughts and ideas, whether you know that person or not. So in that moment, they feel safe to share because maybe the people around them do not relate or understand. So even if they don't even know if you're going to relate or understand, the fact that they're telling somebody they admire, like you were saying at the beginning, people just want to be heard. They want
yeah,
to be heard. And then sometimes it just, yeah, it is. You're a stranger, but not really. In their eyes, you're not. They know
yeah,
everything about you, right? They know everything about your character and about your life. So
yeah,
you're not a stranger. Fans are not. And actually, let's talking about that. It's thinking about even the grief that we experience as a population when somebody in the public eye dies,
yes,
right? So therefore we feel it like as if we had known them because you do. So that's the type of connection the fans are having with you. It's like, there goes Evie. Hold on. I have to put my minute something. The guys are in the backyard and she's have to edit that her bark. Um so yeah, so it's people do know you. You may not know them back, but they know
right. Yeah,
they know you and they trust you. They trust you by what they know of you, and that's the reason they're giving you that information. And that is a huge responsibility to some extent to have this, right? It can be, but you have to know how to be able to manage all those emotions, and you've done it beautifully. Now going circling back again to yourself and your own grief journey, where are you now? How is your corazoncito doing, your heart? And in your process, are you feeling, have you allowed it to start loving again? Have you allowed yourself that space to have that idea even come to your mind again?
yeah. I'm doing a lot better. I think that we were also thrown into a pandemic that kind of like brought up a whole other, level of emotions that were deep, dark in somewhere. So I think
Mhm.
it's, you can get out of one grief and then go kind of into something else. Um,
True.
I did date somebody for a bit, for a while, and it was a really beautiful relationship. And I just, now I look back and I go, holy cow, I was so not ready for any of that. Like I tried, and I was being loved and I was loving, and there was just a lot that I hadn't worked through myself that I
Mm.
needed to, because I just had blocks and my own insecurities and whatever. And so unfortunately it didn't work out. And now that I've like dug deeper into other patterns of relationships and emotions and everything, I realize, oh wow, I really wasn't ready. And um of course I want to love again, and of course I want to, be in a relationship again. I think that it ebbs and flows, right? We feel stronger at some points where we're like, oh, I'm ready to take on the world, and other times I'm like, you know what, I'm feeling a little introspective and I need to, sit with some stuff a little bit longer. And I think that this year has also made the world reconsider how they view so many things and what their priorities are and what they want.
Mm.
So I think it has been a learning experience for us to take deeper looks at everything, and how we
Yes.
want to do things.
Now, let's talk a little bit too about that aspect of this year. Plus, you've been in California, is it 2 years now?
3.
3. Okay, so 3 years. So it's been okay. So how was it then moving out of, because we didn't talk about that. You see, I like touching on all the different levels of grief. Like, wait, can I do this within an hour? Let me try. Um, how was that move for you to California? And did you have friends there? Did you have to again start from scratch creating your
Yeah.
tribe there? How was that? And again, being in the fact that it was during close, after a breakup of kind of starting again, how was that transition for you?
I moved a year after that breakup, and I was still in a lot of pain. But I think I did, like, made strides. I called myself a walking self help book that year. I did acupuncture. I did, you know, therapy, meditation, yoga. I read a bunch of books. One of the ones that I think is so fabulous is Option B by Sheryl Sandberg. Like, that helped me a ton. And when I moved out, I was ready for a change because every single corner of New York City reminded me of him.
Mm,
Even if they were beautiful experiences, it was so nostalgic. Oh my God, that was the last time we had brunch there. Oh, that's where we used to get off the subway for his show. Oh, that's where and it was so hard. I love New York, but I was like, shit, this is so tied to him.
mm.
And or bumping into friends or people that worked with him on the subway, and then I'd be like, ah, like a mini anxiety attack. It was really hard.
Like, how do I walk the other way so that I don't
Yeah,
have to even talk about
yeah. And I
this?
didn't I didn't move to LA
And your
to escape
friendships.
that. Huh?
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. Were your friendships, if it was 10 years, were your friendships also some of them even then, um,
A lot
you
of
know,
them, yeah.
yeah, because
A
some of
lot of
them
them
were
were
couple type of related relation
yeah, and we
friendships.
we made it work, and I think that's the who were his closer friends. Well, I ended up not seeing as
Took
much, and then I
sides.
just
Mhm.
focused on mine, and it was like
Okay,
it
okay.
was, but I did feel like I'd lost a
Mhm.
group of people in my life that, like, I would see on a monthly basis for whatever reason, and then all of a sudden, like, that's
That's
gone.
a whole other layer right there too, so it's like
And
everything's changing, the relationship, friendships, things
yeah,
around you, then suddenly everything you're surrounding or yourself with is reminding you of what you don't have anymore. It's just that's a lot. That is a lot.
one of the biggest relationship ties that, like, still affects me so much are his parents,
Mm.
because
Oh,
I
Talia.
claim I never could have had, like, better in-laws ever, ever, ever. And there's been communication on birthdays and Christmas, and every time I imagine writing an email from, like, the bottom of my heart, I just cry, you know,
Mm.
because I miss them as people, and I miss them as family. It was a family I thought I'd have. It's almost like at this point I'm like, I don't want to be in a relationship with you, dude, but I really miss not having these in-laws because they were so like they were like cool friends that we'd sit and have long dinners with wine, and we'd do trips together, and we'd just become close, and it's a that's been really really sad to this day. Like I still struggle with that.
I'm sure that they also miss you. They also miss you and
Yeah.
the relationship. And it doesn't mean that if by chance he's with somebody else at this moment, that doesn't mean that they don't like that person, but but they still, you know,
Yeah.
miss
No, and I,
you
and I
because
know I know deep down, like, they're
mm,
always gonna care for me, of course. But it's
so
it's one of those
hard.
things that even if I did want to see them, like, I would crumble because I'm like I there's just so much there that I'm still unpacking. Um,
It's a lot, Carolina. It's a
yeah,
lot, and that's the thing. Again, those are all these people. They're called secondary losses when it comes into grief. You have the major one, which is in this case, in your case, was the end of a relationship, but then it's all these other relationships and
yeah,
dynamics that were also changed
yeah.
because of that. And that is something, again, we don't sometimes realize it, and so we think we're grieving just one person. We're
It's
grieving.
Well, and I learned you're also grieving yourself in that relationship, and
Yes.
and you're kind of rebuilding. And I always prided myself in being very independent as he was and very focused on our art. Um but I still grieve, who I was with him and what I was with him. So but I think, back to moving to LA, like I didn't move to escape New York because I stuck it out. I moved when I was ready to. All of a sudden, I was being told by other voiceover people, like, you need to be in LA. You're so talented. What are you doing in New York still? So I moved. I lie. I said I packed 2 suitcases and I said I'm going out for 3 months and I'm going to see,
I'll
how it
Airbnb
goes.
my house and I'll Airbnb my apartment
Literally,
for 3 months and I'll be
yeah.
back.
That it was a really interesting thing because my friend had just lost her mother to cancer and she needed a
Mm.
place to stay. And I said, hey, take my apartment. We extended to 5 or 6 months, I think, because I ended up staying. And then I loved it so much that I was like, and now, like, and she said that apartment gave her this, like, space to grieve that had given me the space to
Mm.
grieve. It was like, and it's a really cozy apartment. And so somehow, like, we were helping each other in that way. And when I came out to LA, I just remember it was January. I flew from Colombia after Christmas there, and I flew here, and the sun was out, and I missed a complete winter storm in New York. And I said, it was like LA received me with open arms, and I hit the ground running with auditions for voiceover, and I said, this is where I belong. Like, it was almost immediate. Like, the third day I said, I need to stay here. And so it was like the timing was just perfect. I needed to be embraced by a new environment, and I was by the city, but then also, like, the voiceover community is the sweetest, most generous, most nerdy community ever. And they were like, let me hook you up with people. I know this guy at Disney. Let me introduce you to these people. And all of a sudden, it was just like my career and my happiness was making sense. I didn't have an apartment. I was subletting a studio, like a tiny place, and renting a car from a friend. Like, I was just figuring it out, but that was the time to, like, do it. And I was still traveling to conventions. It was a little whirlwind, but it was also like, okay. And then I found my apartment here, and I organized myself, and all of a sudden you're like, and now this is my city that belongs to me, and it's not connected to anybody else helping me build an apartment. It was my space. It was me.
Mhm.
I bought my car for my first adult purchase,
Like,
like.
because you didn't have a car in New York. If you did, I don't know how you paid for parking, but
Exactly. No, I didn't. But it was this
yeah.
this reinvention of or
Yes.
like reconnection with,
Catalina
me.
2.0. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you mentioned those 10 years too, those very such formative years because you're in your early 30s. And so it's like your whole like 20s, you
My whole
basically
20s.
that's when we are really honing into who we are. Because
Yeah.
before that, we've just been home
Yeah.
with our parents, we're papi and mommy's daughter, whatever, that role that we play. And all of a sudden we're on our own. So that was a very defining moment that you did co-create who you were partly with the people
Yeah.
that were around you and him being one of them. And so yeah, you're right. Now this other decade now of your life, this new decade of your life, you're in LA starting um your 30s, and it just, creating your new you. And we're always constantly evolving and
Yeah.
changing, and knowing that that's the only thing that's constant is change.
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
then that way we don't get so stuck you know on things being always the same. So, but
Yeah,
it
for
looks like you've
sure.
been doing amazing, and I know it's
Well,
still tough, but
no, I know, and it's really interesting because I remember when at the beginning of the breakup, I'd see people that had also gone through something similar. They'd be like, "Don't worry, you're gonna cry through it, but you're gonna make it. Like, if I got out of this, you will too." Like, I had people sort of guiding me, and friends who had been through similar experiences after 8-year relationships. And then when a year into being here, my friend was getting a divorce after 10 years, and I was there to hold the piece of it. And I said, "Listen, you're going to get through this. I know you are because I did." And the same things you hear. And she goes, and I said, "And one day you're going to be me to somebody else." And sure enough, now she's like
she
freaking helping. So, like, but because you all of a sudden you've been through the fire and you've come out, and then you're like, "Oh, okay, I can bloom again," But
Mhm,
when you're in the
mhm,
middle of the shit, you can't see it.
mhm.
And it's nice to have somebody reminding you that it's possible.
So you touched on the other aspect of this podcast, which is grief, gratitude, and the gray in between. We've talked about the gray in between. We've talked about the grief, and that gratitude component. What you just said right there is the fact that, wow, we can grow from something so hard,
Holy cow.
bloom again, like you just said. What are some of the
Yeah.
things that you are so grateful at, that that you've realized that you've grown in this, going through this experience?
Well, one of the things my older sister had me do since the like breakup happened, she got me this little tiny book that I have over there, and she asked me to write down 3 things I was grateful for every night before bed. And I realized, like, oh my god, every day good things were happening. Even though I was going through this hell, like, this guy made me laugh on the subway, and oh, my friend called from Australia, and whatever. Like, and then I was like, wow. And I think that I realized that about myself. Like, I can still enjoy myself and have a really good time and laugh a ton during the day while I'm going through this grief, because I thought it was all
Yes.
going to be dark. Like you see in the movie, she's depressed and she doesn't get out of bed. No, I was like, ah! Like, I had the greatest dinner, and they go home and go, oh my God. So I think that the capacity for humans to be joyful in the midst of really sad things is something that I've really come to kind of cherish. And I would start clocking moments of pure elation. I remember we were at a convention and somebody was doing karaoke up on stage, and we were singing and enjoying and screaming, and I looked around and I said, "Oh my god, I am in pure bliss right now. I need to clock this moment." And I started like clocking moments that I was really happy for, and I was like, "I know my heart's broken, but man, I'm having a great time right now." And I was like, they do exist. Um and I was just feeling so grateful to get to travel the world. I think that one of my dreams was to be able to like help people and also pursue my acting career. And I never imagined that a video game would give me the platform to be able to inspire young people to pursue their dreams or to feel loved or to feel listened to. And I feel like this did that. So I was like, oh my God, thank you, universe, for giving me this. And I mean, I guess now I can't have ever imagined it differently. While I was going through the toughest year of my life, I was also having like a surge in my career. And so that's what made that year so particular and special.
Mm,
And I
mm.
remember reading, like, everything is perfect in your life, like everything is perfect the way you're supposed to live it. And that sounds so crazy because, like,
Cliche and
because it's
cliche or
not
whatever.
perfect.
Hmm.
But then you go, it had to happen this way for me to
Yes.
like really be grateful for the things that are important, or for me to, I don't know, step into my own power and connect to myself, I guess. Not that I'd ever gotten lost with this partner. I felt like I always had an important sense of self. But all of a sudden you're stripped away from a component that you feel like is a part of your life, and then you're like going, okay, roll with the punches. So
That's roll with the punches. Yeah, I loved that expression that you just, I wrote it down. Clocking moments of joy. That is so important because we sometimes like, okay, let's say a kid goes to school. My kids would go to school, come back. I'm like, "How was your day?" It was horrible. No, no, no. So and so said this, that, and you make the whole day be about
About
one
that.
moment. And in grief, honestly, a lot of times there are probably in our day more moments in which we've probably had a smile, been able to admire a sunrise, a sunset, laughed with a friend over a phone, this, than probably the time we spent crying in bed. But yet we categorize it as it was a horrible day based on just a moment. And if we could take that tip from you of clocking in more moments of our joy
Hmm.
and the things we're grateful for in our day, it would just completely shift
Yeah.
how we view the world.
Well,
So
I
thank you.
remember coming home often and, whoever's waiting at home, a sister, a friend, hey, how was your day? Oh man, I just hit this traffic. And I would start with that one negative thing,
Yes.
and then it could go on for 30 minutes because we expand on it. And I said, no, I'm going to start with the positive thing that happened. And if the negative thing comes up later, sure. But I realized a lot of times I wouldn't need to mention it later because I'd been like, oh my God, Susie was really funny, at the audition today, blah, 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 blah. And then like you go off on that and you're like, you know what? That traffic jam didn't doesn't need energy right now. And I think that that's like we spend energy on negative things a lot. And like trolls on the internet, we focus on that one negative comment instead of the thousand positive ones. And it's like, why do we do it? Why do we let that happen? So
Yeah, well, you've definitely had to learn and create that armor, that same handstand that you've done. You have to keep on practicing every day in your daily life. Like you said, even just with trolls, when they come and say stuff, you have to remember your own power and how you can stand on your own strength,
yeah.
to be able to withstand those things that come around you. Anything else you want to say before we wrap up that I have not asked? Because I always end up going on all the tangents that maybe there's
Yeah.
stuff that we've left unsaid.
No, I guess it's just like the idea that I, especially when I talk to my close people now and anybody I meet at a Comic-Con, is like everybody goes through some sort of loss, right? And not and none of us act perfectly during it because we have to experience it to process it. I think that a lot of times I tried to stop myself from crying, or I would say I should be over this grief right now, and the should, I should be feeling this or I shouldn't be feeling that, and we should nothing. I feel like we shouldn't judge our feelings that we're feeling in the moment, and that's taken me a really long time to go. It's still okay to cry about this, and it's still okay because I'm still processing. And I think that even as young kids, we weren't taught to process things. I think even in Latin America, a little boy falls. I don't cry, don't cry. It's like
Los
no,
niños
like
no lloran. Los niños no lloran. Boys don't cry. Hmm.
and I think that we all need to learn to process. Or if I was angry as a kid, oh, don't get angry. Just no, let me feel the anger and let me just process it. And then I'll get over it in 10 seconds instead of telling me not to feel it. Like we keep telling people they shouldn't feel things. And I think all feelings are okay and are valid. And we have to process them because that's the only way we get over them. Like during the pandemic, I was still feeling some stuff from my breakup that I thought, oh my God, I thought I'd gotten past this. And it was like, no, because I didn't let myself process it. So then like pandemic comes and bites all of us in the ass, and now we're like really uncovering
Hmm.
our demons and our skeletons in the closet. And so it's like accept
And
a
yours is a
feeling.
literal closet. Yours is a
My
literal
literal
closet. The
closet.
one, your literal, the one where you actually go and get in to record. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Being able to face yourself. That's the thing. We had to being in. You have to like yourself enough to be able to be locked in your own home for a year, and
Yeah.
yeah, you have to assess and kind of see, oh, okay, what are these demons? What are these things I have to deal with, and can I live with
Well,
these
and
parts of me?
and letting yourself feel them, right? Like
Absolutely.
maybe you
Yeah.
feel ashamed that you're feeling them, but not just feel them and feel the shame
Mhm.
and then let it go, right? And I think that
Yeah.
we, I wish there were courses in high school and college that would, in kindergarten, they would teach us to feel emotions and process them and know that they're okay instead of to tamper them down, because feeling the grief is how we get past it instead of ignoring it, and so that's one of the things that I just feel it like I'd love to you know express because it's very important, so And there's joy in the
And
middle of it all, and it's okay to laugh while you're still sad. You may have lost somebody,
yes.
but you're allowed to laugh, and all of that is okay.
Yeah, I think that whole aspect of emotional intelligence or emotional, like what you were talking about, we have to become more in tune with that, because in our upbringings, a lot of times we were negated the opportunity to live those emotions.
Yeah,
Joy was one that's always celebrated. Even still, though, there's even aspects of joy that kids are even put down. Like, I don't know, no, grita tanto, no, like
don't
calm down
don't
a
be
little,
so
calm
loud.
down,
Yeah,
like don't be so loud, calm down, like you're just being too, obnoxiously, loud. So we're always constantly being put in check as to
yeah,
how we feel. And even now as adults, like, I mean, I have friends that may say I'm a little too much, because of my emotions being over over the top. But it's like as if we're supposed to be ashamed of those emotions.
yeah.
And that's just not, yeah, we're not okay. We should be allowed to kind of just express them as they go along. Before we wrap up, how can people see you? I know you have a certain projects right now going on. Share a little bit about that, and I'll make sure to put your information. Oh my gosh, it's been such a, we could keep on
We
chatting
could, we could, we could.
forever,
um,
forever.
I have I post on Instagram mostly, so everything's at Ravassa is my last name. That's my Instagram. And usually, if you just Google my name, you'll find all the social media attached to it. But I'm on Twitter as Carolina Ravassa, and my YouTube channel is Hispanglosaxon, where I put up a bunch of varied content. But Instagram is the one that I kind of share most of the important news on, so that's kind of where you can get it.
And what and the project you're recently working on, because I think it's a really interesting one based that has to do with the pandemic. Would you like to
Yeah.
just touch upon that a little bit?
Sure. I I was approached by a writer director with his script, and it really spoke to me because it's about a young, well, it was a 25-year-old, but then we changed it to a 35-year-old, which is my age, cosplayer slash gamer, going through the pandemic alone. And I spent most of the time alone here in my apartment. And it's really about the emotional journey she goes through. And so she's kind of, yes, confronting her demons and figuring out what she wants to do in life because she hasn't been happy in the last couple of years. So it's basically, it's kind of like a one woman show, but I connect to people via FaceTime and Instagram. Um, it's a little bit about the addiction we have to social media and always thinking that everybody else is doing fine and we're not, but social media is
Mm.
a lie. And also just, what kind of romantic relationship are you in? The sister and mom are big support systems in her life, which I thought was beautiful. So it's just a personal journey of how you go through it all of the stuff we're talking about, the grief, to get out and kind of start building yourself back up with confidence and self-love, which I think is a subject that's just important in life, but I think particularly can connect to my followers that love video games, love social media, love cosplay, and we all need to reconnect with who we are and what we want to do and stop comparing ourselves to social media,
Mhm.
because it is photoshopped and it is us when we're happy. And I fall in that trap. I don't share when I'm sad, but I also believe in my own private life. So I'm not going to share what's going down in my personal life on social media because I would never announce it to the world anyway. So I'm not going to do it on social media. I use social media to uplift people. So, I think
Mhm.
everyone uses it in different ways, but then it might seem like Carolina's always happy because her social media is always happy. No, we have all of our lives are up and down constantly, but we choose what to share because we also have the right to privacy. So, so it's a mix of all of that stuff, but it's a project close to my heart.
Well, your fans will know a little bit more if they listen to this podcast. They'll know a little bit more
Absolutely.
about all the ups and downs, and not only how a little bit about how it is for you to face them, but how they also helped you in that year, as well
Absolutely.
as you were grieving, and in that first year, especially because you were going through a lot of Comic
Yeah.
Cons and stuff that year.
Yeah.
So, how it's all interconnected too. So, thank
Thank
you.
you.
It's
Thank
been
you for having me.
so
This was really
amazing.
wonderful to talk about.
It's been so awesome to reconnect after all these years. And yes, it's a tough topic, but again, something that we all go through, and that by you again being vulnerable here, thank you, Carolina, for being vulnerable, sharing your story. That even though you tend to keep these things out of the public eye, um, somebody else might relate to this and feel moved to know that, oh, wow, what I'm going through, somebody else has gone through as well. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.